So Rob, I'm very excited to speak with you. I think this is quite a rock and roll interview because I think we got some feedback in the background. Are you actually doing this interview from a tour bus?
Yeah. Once I'm on the road, I just live on the bus.
Yeah, you've been living on the bus for quite some time. I mean, this is kind of like about more than half your life at this point that you've been a road warrior, right?
Yeah, I think I'm more comfortable here than I am in most places. Yeah, I guess we as a band, we made our last record, I think, in 2012, somewhere around there.
Oh, right.
And after that tour, I mean, also we're a touring band, so when you put out that record, then you promote it, then we tour it for a year and a half, then you take a break, and then I made a solo record and toured that for a year and a half, and then everything shut down for a couple years. And so we as a band, after that record, we kind of thought we weren't going to make records anymore. Like we thought we would just go tour every now and then, maybe put out a song or two here and there, and that was just kind of going to be the model of what our career was going to be. And we were all kind of getting older and busy doing other things. And then in last year, when we postponed the tour, it was the first year that we postponed, but a lot of other people were out, right? Like it wasn't like everybody was postponing. And we were really taken in a really good way by how many of our fans were still holding on to those tickets and waiting for when we finally went out. And we thought, if we're going to be home all summer and we're not going to go out on tour, maybe we should just rethink about putting together a full record so that when we come out, we've got something new, instead of just a whole nostalgia tour. And we pulled together like 5 or 6 songs, and we felt like we really liked where it was going, so we just kept going with it.
So Where the Light Goes, the 5th album that's about to come out, this isn't the first time that you guys have taken, I guess, what could be called a hiatus. You kind of were working at a steady clip from like 1995 to 2002, record every 3 or so years. And then there was 10 years between the 3rd and 4th album, and now 11 years between this album and the most recent one. So did something happen after the 3rd record, like in your personal life with families or with interband relations or whatever, where you just sort of were like, it's time to pump the brakes and, do things at a more relaxed pace?
Well, I mean, I think, when we're first starting out and we're young, the band was everything to us. It had to be. And not just us, but it was like, you kind of feel like everybody in your family is like army wives because they're married to the band too. And they, and so you give up everything and all of your time and your friendships and you just kind of live it. You get older and you have other gardens to tend to, and you get families and you get kids and you just other things that become more important than the band. Also, when the band, started to get more collaborative, where everybody started writing more, is when I needed to have a solo career, because it gave me an opportunity to get all my songs out and not be so precious about real estate in Matchbox world and let everybody to kind of collaborate. And then, Kyle started doing solo stuff. Paul's been having a thriving film composing career and TV composing career. So, it just kind of became we do it when it works for us. And we always kind of figure if we do something and we like the quality of how we do it and we go out and we give everything when we go on tour, it doesn't matter how often we do it. It just matters that we do it when we're ready for it so we can give it everything.
Since we're talking about sort of your kind of concurrent meteoric solo career that you have had, at the same time that Matchbox 20 has been going on, I read something recently. It's very timely because I'm a huge George Michael fan, and he finally just got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I'm so excited.
I mean, yeah, maybe you could be the one to give the induction speech, because is it true when you wrote Smooth, which obviously ended up being a huge hit for Santana and a huge career landmark for yourself? I've read that you wrote that initially for George Michael to sing. Is that true?
That was my original thought in my head, because I wasn't supposed to be singing it. I was just writing. And George and I had the same manager. And so and he's fucking George Michael. I mean, like, he's just one of the most fabulous singer, songwriter, performer, producers of all time. And so, yeah, he was kind of the thing in there. And it's funny because when I told him about that, he was just like, eh.
George was that?
Yeah, he was like, eh.
Did you tell him after the fact?
Yeah.
Oh, so he never had a chance to hear it and say yes or no or record it or
I brought the idea up to Clive, and apparently they just went through a bunch of different people, and Carlos had never heard of me because he was listening to the demo, and I sang on the demo, and he was just like, well, does this guy sing? And they were like, yeah, he's in a band, he's a he's doing well. And so Carlos was like, well, I believe him, so let's just have him do it. And I was
Wow.
like,
The
and
rest
then
was history.
24 years later or something, I find myself, I think, 3 years younger than Carlos was when we did it together. And Carlos now is one of my best friends in the world. Like, we were just texting each other because we are both, sending each other pictures from crowds of the night.
Wow, amazing. I mean, obviously it all worked out well, but I would have loved if George had a chance to do his own version on one of his on that like covers record he did or something like that. But
I mean, I think he would have killed it. I mean, but if it wasn't going to be him, I'm glad it was me.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why you're glad about that. It all worked out pretty well for you. I was talking about how Matchbox 20 were going at a really steady clip before, for the first three albums. And like I said, that was going on the same time as this whole smooth supernatural phenomenon. I imagine, I mean, it must have been having that kind of success. I mean, I guess it wasn't right out of the gate, meaning, you'd been a band for a while, but having that kind of massive success in with their first album for Matchbox 20. And this was a time when people still bought records, a time when like a band could sell 12 million of their debut album. Like that must have been, I mean, in both good ways and bad ways, a bit of a mind F for you to have. I mean, it was pretty overnight from what I remember.
There were parts of it, like, so, I mean, we were a jobbing touring band, early on, that were playing, college, 4-hour sets, at frat houses and college bars and stuff like that, and doing half covers and half originals forever. And then we got signed, and everything kind of happened in these little plateaus. Like, there would be the first year we learned how to be a great national touring club band, right? And then things got a little more successful. And so for the next year, we were really learning how to be like more of a small arena, big theater band. And then in the third year, we were internationally traveling, doing arenas like all around the world. And so we kind of had these little moments where we could settle in and get used to it. But we were aware early on that kind of initial success is you have to live it. There's a lot to live up to, right? And a lot that's been put on your plate, and a lot of rooms that you're in now with people who are a lot better at it than you are, and you've got to learn how to step up to that. And then also you got to live it down, because people have an intention that they think that you think it means something about you, right? Mm-hmm. That you walk into a room and that you feel like you own that success, and you don't. You're still like a kid trying to figure it out. And then having Smooth, like kind of in between that first and second record, having that second record that we were really proud of, and having like Bent and If You're Gone and like those moments on that record, that's when we started to really feel like we hit our stride, and kind of started to feel like who we were as a band, and we started to kind of own the space that we were in. But it took us a while to kind of get used to that, and I'm kind of, I'm glad that we did, and I'm glad we didn't let it just consume us.
I have read that with the success that you had with Smooth, and also your first solo record as well, and around that time, that there were people in the industry advising you to basically become George Michael, be solo, or be Sting, break off from the band and be a solo artist, but you never did that, which is interesting.
What's funny was, like, when I went solo, there was so many voices coming at me telling me not to go solo, and then I went solo and it went really well, and then there's so many voices telling me not to go back to Matchbox, and then and I like the fact, like, it's a very unique situation to be in, to be able to go solo and concurrently just going back and forth between the band and solo, and having it work, and honestly, it all depends on the generosity of the guys in this band, allowing that to happen, and that's not always been easy.
I was going to ask about that, yeah.
Not easy when it's a summer that they want to go out and I'm going out, Like, I remember once they wanted to go out on tour, but I was already going out with the Counting Crows, and then we had to wait till the next year so we could go out, and then we all went out with the Counting Crows again. That takes a lot on their part, but also it requires a lot of fans, to kind of want to take that journey with you and allow you to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's been great seeing the Matchbox fans are their RT fans and vice versa. They all come out, and in fact, sometimes now the lines have been really blurred, because like people come to the Matchbox show and are requesting, solo songs, and I'm just like, oh no, that's not happening here. We don't do that here. We do that there. Here,
You really do separate the church and state with the two discographies.
One time it was like my 40th birthday at the Garden, and the guys secretly learned one of my solo songs to play, like, for my birthday, and they surprised me with it on the stage, and I thought that was really cool.
So there was no, like, I mean, as one might expect, no like jealousy or resentment about the fact that you were having this success outside of the band? I mean, that's a common occurrence, I imagine.
I mean, I think there was none that ever came to anything, if that makes any sense. Like, we're friends first. We've been friends for 30 years. I think Paul put it really well. He's just like, even if there were certain things about my decisions that put a strain on their situation, none of us would deny another one the chance to do something that makes them genuinely happy.
Mm-hmm.
And so like Paul knows that my solo thing is just very important to me, and he wouldn't ask me not to do it for him, So I think as we get older, I think we think about the things that we have and not so much the things that we don't.
It's interesting to me because I was talking about sort of the, at least seemingly overnight success of Matchbox 20, and obviously huge record sales, a lot of fame. But, when I was doing a little research for this interview, I don't think I realized exactly how kind of rough a life you had up until Matchbox 20. Do you ever think about, like, if music hadn't worked out for you as spectacularly as it has, like what you would be doing with your life now? I mean, because you couldn't imagine this,
No, I'm not suited for anything else. Like, I'm not really good at anything else. I don't have any skills, like life skills. I did, like, leading up to it, I had almost every kind of a job that you could have that wouldn't become a career, right? Like any kind of a job that I could have that I could quit on a Friday if I had a gig and then get a new job on a Monday. So I did every kind of restaurant work, every kind of construction work, every kind of delivery jobs, driving stuff, building, making futons, delivering beds, roofing, drywall. Like, I just did like pretty much anything I could do. Because at that point, I had just been navigating my way through a bad situation, kind of like floating around, living on park benches and hitchhiking around the Southeast, and like really just kind of figuring myself out since I was like 17. And so, it's just like anything else. If you don't have any infrastructure, you don't know where that's going to go. And so I was just lucky enough to kind of settle myself into something that I really, really, and it wasn't like I found a work ethic, right, that I didn't know that I had, because it was just something that I enjoyed so much that I would spend 16 hours doing it all day and learning it and trying to perfect it and get better at it. And then I was like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I actually do have a work ethic. It just has to be something I like.
Did you, I mean, I don't know how much you want to go into your past, but like, did the fact that you definitely dealt with a lot of trauma and hard times in your childhood and your teenhood, did that like light the fire under you? Like, I got to make this music thing work because I don't have a plan. I don't have a plan B. I'm not going to college. I don't have a trust fund. Like, this is it for me.
Yeah. I mean, like, listen, when I was 10 years old, and I was, at my grandmother's house learning how to separate seeds and stems so I could make dime bags so she could sell weed. I didn't have that. Like, when I got back into like a normal life, my mom, had worked really, really hard to get us into a nice middle-class life. And when I got around normal people, I didn't know what that was like. And I realized that if I had gone to Little League and had a normal life, I wouldn't have the point of view that I was afforded, at an early age that I did. And so I find now in my 50s that so many curses along the way have been blessings. And so in a lot of ways, I think I look at it like a gift that I was afforded, kind of a different way of looking at things at an early age. And I wasn't shielded from it. And I wasn't shielded from like some really harsh things, but also the generosity of people, the kind of people that are there to help you when you're in that kind of situation. Like, I existed on the kindness of people who would, take me in. And so I saw that kind of good in people too. And I think if you're a guy who writes songs, and if your songs are about relationships and interpersonal relationships with people, not just romantic, obviously, but familial and platonic and every kind of way that people interact with each other, that's a blessing. And so that's the kind of way I've always looked at it.
Kind of a weird question, but do you think the fact that you grew up with the kind of stuff you're talking about, some dysfunction, and again, a blessing, silver lining sort of way, kind of prepared you for a rock and roll life? Because a rock and roll life is not a stable or normal life. Like, you get exposed to some heavy stuff, you get exposed to some colorful characters, and you hadn't grown up sheltered at all. So it was probably no big deal to you.
Yeah, no, I already had a little gypsy in me. I was really glad that it happened when it happened, and that it was a time that my friend Randall Slavin, photographer, he calls it the last good time, and kind of like coming up in the '90s and finding that success, but doing it on our own. There was nobody filming it. We didn't have to atone for any sins, that we were kind of making along the way, and we got to have that moment and kind of discover it for ourselves in private. It was nice to kind of have it during that time because there's no kit. You know what I mean? Like I feel really bad now. Like famous people are really famous now, and it's a wider scope, and there's much more scrutiny over everything that goes on. And sometimes that's a lot to ask if you're a 20-something-year-old kid who just got handed the keys to the world and you're supposed to just know what to do with it. Like I really have a lot of respect for people that are trying to pull that off now. Like my son's 25 years old. He's trying to get his band off the ground.
Wow.
I'm amazed at like the talent that it takes for them now. This kind of like in this world of like how to market your own band and how to understand social media and how to like traverse that whole world. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. I guess it's kind of the modern day equivalent of like people handing out flyers on the Sunset Strip or something, but in terms of hustling or whatever. But going back to the social media thing, when you and Matchbox 20 were first coming to fame in the mid 90s, the last good time, I mean, have there been moments you've looked back where you're like, thank God not even Friendster existed then, let alone.
Oh man, yeah.
All that.
We like, it's so funny because now, like last night even, we were just having like, we're like, do you remember? And then we're all like, oh my God, I forgot about that. Like we would have, people like it was like a little colony, right? And so we would have like people years later that we would meet and they'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't remember you. And they're like, I lived on your bus for 2 weeks. I'm like, really? Wow. But there was a lot of drugs in the 90s. I mean, there's no other way to say it. So there's a lot of blurry spots in that period, which I tend to think it means I had a good time.
Yeah. I mean, was it all good times or I don't know if, are you sober now? I don't know like what you're.
Oh no, I'm a mess. And my therapist is trying to work on that. But I mean, I'm a much more controlled mess. I've been married to my wife for 24 years. I'm much more about, home life and my dogs and, I got it out of my system, and then I got it out of my system and then met my wife still at the beginning of this journey. So like I met her after like 3 years, maybe 2 years of like from the record signing and coming out. And so then the rest of that time we've done this together. Her and we came up together. We travel all over the country, all over the world together. Like this is a shared experience. So you're just not the person in your 50s that you were in your 20s. I mean, you hope.
How have you guys navigated that? Because you have one of the longer running marriages in rock and roll, and congratulations to that. And from what I've read, it seems like it was kind of an instant love at first sight kind of thing. A lot of times those things burn out fast, flame out fast. And as you mentioned, she was meeting you at a pretty tumultuous time when you had a lot of good and bad, maybe bad things going on. But like, here you are in 2023, still going strong. Like, what do you attribute that to?
I was also like, she was a model and I was 30 pounds heavier and she still was into me. She's my best friend. Like we're ride or die. And she, like I remember the funny, like the minute that we met, we were so in love with each other that Paul got jealous, because up until then, Paul was my girl. and it just, like even now, like we're kind of confused. We're going through some stuff at home with our dog, trying to get her to come out to meet me because we've never been apart for more than 2 or 3 weeks ever. Wow. And so now we're trying to figure out, this is the first time we don't have a plan. So, but the fact that we care about it, I think that's what makes it work,
How's her health these days, by the way?
It's touch and go. It's something that we've it's just a part of us now. I don't think it's going anywhere. I don't think there's like a horizon that works like that, but it's something that you can learn to navigate. And she's unbelievably resilient and strong. And so the second that she gets a good day, she runs with it.
I'm glad that she has good days. It's good to hear. And I'm, sorry for what she's been through, but I'm glad that she's had you for all this, because not everyone gets that.
I
When
think she's going through so much right now, and she just wrote me because she posted something for me on Instagram, and she's like, "I just want to help because I feel like I'm not there for you," and I'm like, "Oh, but I'm not there for you."
Aw. Well, you'll hopefully be together again soon. When you guys got together in 98 or so, and it was such a, explosion, like, and I guess, maybe the cliche of the rock star and the model and all that, were there people that sort of like doubted that this would last?
Everyone. I'm pretty sure everyone. I mean, why would it last? It didn't make any sense. Like I wanted to marry her. I told her I was going to marry her like on our first date, and we got engaged like a month and a half later or something. Like it's just a recipe for disaster. But there it was.
I'm not going to claim that usually would work out. That would be called love bombing now, because now we have words, or not maybe love bombing. I don't know. There's different words for it, but like that kind of explosion, like, yeah, a lot of people would probably say, like, how did you know that this wasn't just a chemistry, a crush, how did you know after a month and a half that you wanted to get married?
I have no idea. Like, we met and there was an instant attraction, and then we didn't have a lot of time together, and I'd gotten her number and I went to Europe almost immediately, like a couple days later. And I would just every night, she was going to college, and I would talk to her, every night before, like after a show, because that was how the time would work out. And she'd stay up all night talking to me. And so by the time we had our first date, we just really knew each other, because we had just hours and hours and hours talking about everything. And so I think that really helped a lot.
I think it also helps when we're talking about how the 90s was the last good time. Nowadays, if that happened, you'd just follow each other on Instagram and maybe text or DM each other.
Yeah, slide in each other's DMs. But no, this was like we had to find a fucking landline.
That's
real.
love. That's love. Yeah, but
like if we were on the road and she wasn't on the road, I'd have to wait till we got to a rest stop so I could get on a payphone so I could call her. Because at that time I just had a pager, which she made because she said it made me look like a drug dealer.
I mean, that's either a drug dealer or a doctor.
The pager was really just for girls that were on the road. So once I met her, I didn't need the pager anymore.
I see. You sort of jokingly said you're still a mess or whatever, but do you mind me? People didn't really talk about mental health back when Matchbox 20 were coming out, and now a lot of people do, or which I think is great. Like, I think it's great that you're even saying something like that in this interview. Like, what as a 50-year-old rock star who's been through a lot, like, what are you grappling with these days? And do you use your art to grapple with it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. This new record is filled with, questions about mortality and questions about, the difference between where you are, where you think you're supposed to be. I mean, I think if you only ruled yourself or like measured out yourself based on your like career accomplishments, that's a pretty shallow way to go. And if you look deeper, everybody's dealing with the same things, like losing my mother was a really big thing for me. My relationship with my father is a really difficult thing for me. My, wanting to be a good dad, to my son, wanting to keep this career off the ground, wanting to keep my marriage going. But like, these are things that everybody deals with, And I think if you don't spend time thinking about them and really giving them a good, thorough investigation, then you're probably not doing it right, And so I do joke. I joke about it all the time, but I think, that's a good mechanism too.
Well, humor is definitely a good mechanism. Well, since, you're obviously on the road, I want to thank you for being so generous with your time, but I want to wrap up by saying, we were talking about the 90s being such the last good time. I tend to agree sometimes. We're also talking about the fact that, when Matchbox 20 came out, it was a time when people sold a lot of records, which unfortunately for like your son's band, it's not the same environment. And I also talked about the fact that Matchbox 20 take very long, breaks between albums. And yet on this tour, you're playing the Hollywood Bowl out here in LA. And without no shade to any other bands, it shall remain nameless, but there's a lot of your peers that came up around the same time that would not be able to play in 2023 a venue the size of the Hollywood Bowl. They'd either be on one of those package tours, or they'd be playing, a theater or a smaller shed. So like, what do you attribute the fact you've mentioned these diehard fans that wait for you? What do you think what's the secret to this kind of like unorthodox longevity that you've had as a band?
I'm not sure. I mean, there's a lot of really, really great bands that maybe didn't get the right break here and there, or along the way, or had personal problems that kind of stopped. I think we I mean, God, there's nothing I can say other than, because you just feel really fortunate, and you feel lucky. I know that like when you're early on, there's a time where if you're lucky enough to have your initial success at the right time, where it's attached to like a kind of a cultural relevancy, right? And then if you do the right things with that, and you invest wisely in that, then years later, that turns into, maybe when you're doing something like we're doing something right now, each time along the way, we just want to have a couple bricks that we put in the wall. So every record that we put out at least has a couple songs that the next time we go tour, people are excited to hear that song. You just want a couple of those each time to build it up. And then we take that, and now that currency that we have that used to be relevancy maybe in the moment is now, a connection with fans that we've had for the last 27 years. Like we play 3 a.m. and people are it's like a time machine sometimes. People are just transported back to when they were in college or when they were, in high school. And that was, the song. I just think we've been really, really lucky and hopefully just done the right things with the successes, that we've had so that we can continue that on in a different way. And so far it's worked. I mean, last night was the first night in Vancouver. And it was phenomenal. We had a great time, like we had never not been together.
That's awesome. Did you expect that 27 years ago or even earlier, when you were a teenager trying to get a band off the ground and going through what you were going through, did you expect at age, I guess 51, are you 51? Like at age 51, this would still be your life. You'd be on a tour bus on the way to the Hollywood Bowl, play for like 20,000 people. Like, did you envision this at all?
I think when you're young, you simultaneously imagine the best case scenario, of all of your, the idols that you grew up with, and being the Stones and being 60 up there doing it, and also, just hoping that your record goes gold so you get to make another record, because, along the way you got to see all of those scenarios play out. We were just one after the other of bands that got signed. And we thought, oh, they'd made it, and then that was it, And so, I think you can hold both realities in your head at the same time, And even if you envision future success, I don't think you really understand what that means.
Awesome. And there was never any plan B, right? You weren't going to be a roofer.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And I told my son that. I was like, if you're going to do it, you just got to live it, and you got to, there's got to be nothing else. You got to give yourself no out.
What's your son's band?
Isn't great parental advice, but for if that's what he wants to do, and he went to Berklee College of Music, he graduated, nice. So he's very, very serious about it and really talented. So he's actually opening the Hollywood Bowl. His band's going to play first.
What's his band called?
They're called The Lucky.
The Lucky. Yep. Look at that name. You said you got lucky, maybe, so it makes sense. Father like son. Well, congratulations on your plan A working out so fantastically.
Thank you,
27 years later. It was lovely to speak with you. And good luck. Have a great time on the road.
Right on. I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Rob. Have a great day.